When we talk about the disease of the moment, it's important we're accurate and correct in all aspects of our commentary. This is especially important if we're running a counter-narrative. The smallest mistake will be seized upon to debunk us as conspiracy theorists and loons. And it's for that reason I held off from making this video for months, pending accurate information. I'd heard anecdotally that the NHS was using a cycle rate of 45 on PCR tests. Why is that important? Well, let's quickly remind ourselves what a PCR test is. The test involves getting a nasal swab, but we can't detect any viruses at that point because we don't have sensitive enough testing equipment. So we put the sample through a PCR cycle. Each cycle doubles the amount of virus present. Mathematicians call this a geometric progression. This is a powerful tool, but the number of times you cycle a sample is critically important. After 10 cycles you get 1,000 times the original amount, 20 cycles a million, 30 cycles a billion, 40 cycles a trillion, etc. So at some point you're magnifying the original sample so much the results become essentially meaningless and the person won't be infectious. The European Journal of Microbiology has shown that if you have to cycle a sample more than 34 times to get a positive test, it is not possible to achieve cell culture infection in the laboratory. This is the gold standard test, and they conclude that anyone with a positive test that was not achieved until 34 or more cycles is not infectious. So as you can see, the PCR cyclical rate is very, very important. So I decided to ask the Department of Health what the NHS was using as a rate. I thought they'd probably ignore me, so I asked my MP to ask them the question. They wouldn't ignore an MP, one from the governing party, right? So I asked her to ask that question on September 2nd, and I waited. And I waited. I sent her a few chase emails, and she assured me she'd written to them, but they apparently didn't write back. Over the weekend, however, I came across this. It's the NHS standard operating procedure for PCR tests. This is how they do it. So after wading through a pretty dry document, I eventually happened on page 21 where it confirmed the PCR cycle rate used for tests in the UK is 45 iterations. The anecdotes I'd heard were true. This is not a small error. 45 iterations magnifies an original sample 16 trillion times, and it should be obvious to anyone that you'll get a host of positive cases which can't be infectious. Remember, this isn't the flawed procedures in collecting the samples which have been discussed elsewhere. This isn't the contamination in the laboratories that the dispatches program exposed. This is a massive error in the basic methodology of the tests, even if they were performed correctly. So when we add a 45 cycle threshold to the chaotic and flawed testing procedures and the results, the case totals we hear about daily, are more or less junk science. I can't see how they don't know this. You surely can't base public policy on data like this. People's jobs and businesses and livelihoods are being destroyed all over the country. Our freedoms being hammered. A vaccine with completely unknown and unknowable long-term consequences is pushed upon us. And why? Because of these case totals. This is a national scandal and we need to make everyone aware of this. Now, I know it's hard getting people to pay attention, but we have to get this information out there. So please share this video. Send a link to all your contacts. The truth must out, and with the power of social media, we can do it. This is the data with which we can shatter a lying narrative. This is the data we can show to save our freedoms. This is the data that will save our jobs, and this is the data we can use to save our fellow countrymen from being coerced into being human lab rats so Big Pharma can make big money wholly free of legal consequences. Please, share the truth. Set people free. If you like this, please like, recommend and subscribe.